Excellency, Prime Minister. It's a great honor to host you at the G7. India has been coming to the G7, I believe, since 2018 in Biarritz with our French partners, and it's a testament to the importance of your country, to your leadership, and to the importance of the issues that we look to tackle together, from energy security, from the energy transition that you're helping to lead, to the future of artificial intelligence.
Prime Minister Mark Carney and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting a little bit earlier this hour, a highly anticipated meeting ahead of the Prime Minister's press conference, which will take place a little bit later next hour. I'm here with the front bench to talk about both of those things. Brian Gallant, Rana Ambrose, Tom Mulcair, and Colton Prell. Rana, I'll start with you. We just heard a little bit of a snippet kind of at the outset of that meeting from the Prime Minister. Do you think it was the right call to invite Modi to Canada? And how do you anticipate they're going to navigate all the blowback?
Yeah, can you hear me, Vashi?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay, great. I think it was the right thing to do. Look, there's the relationship has been troubled. There's been some sort of, scandal on our side, but really the real substantive issues were what happened with the Indian government in Canada, accusing with, legitimate evidence behind the accusations and allegations about the assassination of a Canadian on Canadian soil, with the potential involvement of the Indian government. That was obviously a huge change and a huge shift in the relationship. Offense was taken. We still don't have a complete. Our diplomats are still not back in India the numbers they used to be, and as well here in Canada on the Indian side. So there's a lot of repair to make, but I think it's important because, look, from a point of view of ensuring that India stays on the side of the G7 and on the side of the Western world with, sharing whether it's diplomatic ties or economic ties with countries that share our values is important. We know that there's a strong relationship between India and Russia, India and China, and as much as we can continue to make sure that it has close ties to countries like Canada, I think that's positive. I think economically, India is one of the big targets for Canada when we talk about diversifying trade away from China. We do very little trade with India, and yet India is a federation. India shares many of the same democratic values, and yet and it's a massive market, and yet we're not trading with it as much. So we've got a lot of repairing to do. India has a lot of repairing to do with us, but I think that's underway. Some statements that have been made have been helpful, but there's still some work to do. In terms of domestic politics here in Canada, the Khalistani community, look, I don't know if you saw them as you drove out to Banff, but there was hundreds, if not more, hundreds of cars, maybe several hundred protesters along the highway ready to greet Prime Minister Modi. So there's also a big domestic political issue, and of course for legitimate reasons on both sides that Prime Minister Carney would have had to address. So, prickly situation for him as a Prime Minister, but I think he did the right thing in starting to repair the relationship. And we have to expect that Prime Minister Modi is a signal that he is also trying to repair the relationship.
Tom, Rana mentions the protests, and she's right, they're quite substantial between Calgary and Banff. I think they're also reflected by members of the Prime Minister's own caucus who, in a very civil way, expressed their concern about about the presence of Prime Minister Modi, and asked him to raise certain things and explicitly sort of get the statement from Modi that they will cooperate with any investigation. Do you anticipate the Prime Minister has to address that tonight, the degree to which he did or didn't sort of raise that with Mr. Modi?
He'll do it obliquely. He's not going to say that he has a deal with the Indian government for this or that, but I do think that it's going to be necessary for Mr. Modi to put something on the table that Canada can explain to Canadians, because the Sikh community is very upset and frankly very worried. It was a surprise to see Jagmeet Singh back in the picture, but he reminded people that he had been put under guard by the RCMP because of threats that they believe could have been coming from the Indian government. So this is real. for Sikhs living in Canada, and they want to be able to express their views like every other Canadian without fear. But it's mostly the problem at its base, I believe, Vashi, is how this came about. Mr. Trudeau used this on the first day of Parliament. He was down in the polls. This was something big that was going to draw attention away from his polling numbers and from everything else. And he hit it so hard and he hit it so bluntly that the Indian government took great offense and was able to almost position, at home anyway, itself as the victim here. The Americans had to deal with something almost identical. They had clear evidence of an attempt by agents of the Indian government to try to assassinate someone, an American, on American soil. It didn't happen in the States, but they didn't go over the top. They dealt with it through the normal, tough diplomatic channels, which is not what we did. So I think that there's been errors on both sides, us in the way we dealt with it. The Indian government, of course, if it does turn out to be the case, as evidenced by the findings of Madam Justice Ho, that the Indian government was involved. So I think that it's both at the same time. And it is an opportunity to start mending fences, because Carney put out a paper just before the G7 reminding everyone that this was one of the main objectives was new partnerships. Right. And you can't talk about an Indo-Pacific trade relationship if you don't have India involved. So Canada's looking for those new partnerships. India is absolutely part of it. And that's why we have to be the adults in the room in dealing with this.
Brian, your thoughts on that?
I think my esteemed colleagues make lots of good points and really, I think, clearly illustrate why this was a difficult one. I tend to agree that I think it's important to try to restart the relationship. And I think Rona's absolutely right to say that both are signaling they're willing to do that. And look, every country, not every, but almost every country that you deal with, there are arguments as to things that people have said or done or history that you could basically say to yourself, well, we want to be careful on this topic or not meet with the person at all. And I think at the end of the day, you have to kind of weigh the risks and benefits. You have to weigh the way in which you think this will help your people. And again, maybe the geopolitical considerations at play and weighing all of that, especially given it is still in a process at the moment. I think weighing all of that, it makes sense. I won't repeat what my esteemed colleagues mentioned because I agree with almost all of their points. So I think that they lay out again what was being weighed, and we just kind of paraphrasing Rona. But I mean, look, India is a counter to the rise of China. I mean, they're going to be incredibly important for the Western blocs and for Canada specifically if we can mend that relationship. But again, as I think Tom did very well to point out as well, that's not easy to do given recent history. So certainly the two getting together, I think, is a good thing. And obviously it's a way to try to restart things. But if we find that process and ultimately in more information, more concrete information, more allegations, we'll certainly see on a panel, all of us discuss and try to weigh all of it again with more information.
Last 30 seconds to you, Colton. How do you what questions, I guess, do you anticipate the Prime Minister gets on this and more broadly the summit tonight when that press conference happens?
How do you balance those two priorities, both defending Canada, not only with regards to the RCMP investigation, but also foreign interference, while also taking advantage of what is the fastest growing economy in the world? And two, is it worth it? Is it worth it in your minds to push aside potentially some of the concerns that exist here in Canada in order to bolster economic relations with India?
I'm very curious to see if he adds more meat to the bone, because in that first press conference after he announced the invitation, Prime Minister Carney kind of deferred all questions around those allegations to a legal process unfolding. So it'll be interesting to see if there's more specific answers tonight. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks, everyone, for a great discussion. As always, I appreciate it. Our front bench, Brian Gallant, Rana Ambrose, Tom Mulcair, and Colton Farrell.